To make matters worse, the little shit was born a ginger, smart-ass, socially moronic, often getting into fistfights with the other boys. He supposed that's why he always wound up in the stupid classes. It wasn't uncommon for Brooklyn boys to come home with black eyes, especially in those days, but when war broke out, Red really showed the world just how much he loved to piss people off. He got a gig in his early years as a shill for a shoot-'em-up game in Coney Island. Many of the sailors that came to port mistook him for an 18-year-old, often giving him grief for not enlisting. "We're at war with freedom," they'd preach. Red never felt like he needed to clarify his age, and was never afraid to put his dukes up, even against government-trained killers. Red once claimed to have survived falling off the New Jersey Palisades. He probably did, but only a few feet. It was likely that there was rolling involved. Red never clarified the details of his stories. He always talked about how he drove off a cliff, and because of his impeccable driving skills, everyone survived, including the car. Red had a knack for handling gravity-centric events and bragged up to the age of 82 just how healthy he was. He got a job as a business consultant thanks to his time at Columbia University, which, like his anti-gravity claims, was questionable. In the late 1950s, early 60s, this is how he got his start. By the 1970s, Red was well on his way to becoming a millionaire, and this part is absolutely true. Coming from deep Brooklyn in this era, it's easy to understand why Red would get involved with organized crime. For many years, he was a business consultant for the Gambino crime family, and many underlings used his apartment to traffic money and product. It was conveniently located at Lincoln Triangle, and Red often described stacks of cash on his dining room table and about the apartment. Red was once summoned to testify at a Chicago court hearing against one of his associates. The prosecutor made an effort to spin reality, looping Red in as a conspirator. On the stand, Red was asked, "So why is it that you were the only one to get your money back?" Red stood up, leaned in towards the examiner, and said, "Because I asked for it." Everyone, including the judge, broke out laughing, because they all knew what that had meant. But only Red knew the details. He hung the motherfucker out his window 300 feet above the intersection of Amsterdam and Broadway. Red was the only investor to be paid back every penny in under 48 hours. Red didn't fuck around, even in his stories. Red had special underwear he wore when attending orgies that he was often invited to, and wasn't afraid to label his ex-wife as the best lay he ever had. Ray often picked fights with people at the Fairway grocery store. His family often had to keep him from escalating disputes. The desire to throw punches permeated his personality from cradle to grave. I met Red at the tail end of his life. He was then a business consultant for the food industry. He claims to have chosen the specific beef used in Wendy's hamburgers. He had a knack for staffing or restaffing struggling organizations. We didn't get along. Our last words with one another were not kind. He accused me of being ungrateful and suggested that I have severe psychological issues. I accused him of building a career off firing people. I gave him shit because he tried convincing others that those he fired often returned to thank him. I told him that people don't thank those that fire them. Of all of his stories, this always seemed the least plausible. People do not like their jobs, I say, but what they hate is not making ends meet. No one thanked you. He was in his early 80s and struggling with living alone for the first time in his life. With all of these survival stories, the thing that took Red in the end, a mosquito. Red ended up as the first person in the northeastern United States to contract the West Nile virus, stemming from one of his usual visits to Sagaponack, New York, the second wealthiest zip code in America.